The Buddha's timeless Dhamma. Stop changing it. Change yourself. Your practice doesn't come together simply because causes and conditions happen to be that way. There's something inside you that has to want it to happen and to make it happen. You look at the images the Buddha gives for people who do the practice, people who are searching for something, people who are struggling, fighting in battles, people who are being trained in skills. All of these activities require an element of will. The term for will in Pali is Adhiṭṭhāna, determination. And there are 4 determinations that are really helpful for the practice. It's good to keep them in mind. The first, the Buddha says, is not to neglect discernment. What does it mean to neglect discernment? It implies that you have some discernment already, but you're not paying attention to it. Remember that the basic principle of discernment is that you look at your actions to see which of your actions lead to long-term welfare and happiness, and which ones lead in another direction. Then, not to neglect discernment means that you actually promote the ones that lead to long-term happiness. That's why the Buddha said one of the measures of your discernment is when you see there's something you don't like to do, but you know is going to give good results, happiness in the long run, you're able to talk yourself into wanting to do it. You're not just forcing yourself, you're giving yourself reasons. You see why it would be a good thing to be more generous, to be more virtuous, to meditate more, realizing that these things really are for your benefit. All the aspects of the training are there for your benefit. This is probably why that Zen master said that the great way is not difficult for those with no preferences. He wasn't saying that you don't prefer the end of suffering to suffering. You do prefer the end of suffering. It's simply that you look at what's required to put an end to suffering and see that some things will be difficult, but you don't let your preferences get in the way. You're willing to do whatever is needed to be done. This is in line with one of the meanings of the principle of practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. We're not here to change the Dhamma or to update it. The Dhamma is timeless, as we chant almost every day. It's a kaliko. There's nothing in the Dhamma that needs to be changed. What needs to be changed is in us. So when you're willing to make those changes, that's what it means to not neglect discernment. The second determination is to guard the truth. Now, this has a particular meaning in the Pali Canon. It means that you're very careful to be alert to where you get your knowledge. When you have a certain opinion, where did it come from? And why are you holding to it? When you're careful about this, you realize how little you really know, and when you're taking on the path, how much you actually take on conviction. That also means that if you're operating on conviction, what can you do to confirm it? You may like something because it seems reasonable, but the Buddha said that that's not proof that it's actually true. A while back, I was getting emails from someone who said that because the commentaries come from an unbroken tradition, we have to accept them. Well, as the Buddha himself said, just because something comes from an unbroken tradition doesn't mean it's true. A tradition is no stronger than its weakest link. What the tradition teaches might fit in with your ideas about what you think you already know, but that, too, isn't proof that it's really true. This principle reminds you that you're going to have to test things. What method of proof does the Buddha's recommend? You actually take on a teaching, you put it into practice, and you see what results you get. If something leads you to act in ways that lead to long-term welfare and happiness in line with the principles of discernment, okay, then you know you've got something true. If your actions lead to long-term harm and suffering, the teaching that inspires them is false. So, you have to put things to the test if you want to guard the truth. That means putting yourself to the test as well, because your powers of judgment can be skewed. I know a large number of people who say, "Well, I've tried mindfulness practice and it doesn't really do much for me, so there must be nothing there." But exactly how did they do it? How much did they do it? How committed were they to doing it? How did they guard the truthfulness of their own actions? That's the big question right there. So, when you test the Buddha's teachings, you're going to be testing yourself. This test will make demands in terms of how much mindfulness you develop, how much alertness you develop, and how much ardency. When Ajahn Lee discusses those 3 qualities that you bring to mindfulness practice, when the question comes as to which of them embodies discernment, he says it's the ardency. Again, this would be another meaning for not neglecting discernment, that you're really ardent in testing things. You're really ardent in testing yourself so that you really come to the truth. Look at the Buddha and all that he went through in order to find the truth. Even when he gained awakening, he tested it from various angles to make sure it constituted real awakening. When he found that, no matter which angle you looked at it from, it constituted genuine knowledge, genuine freedom, only then did he teach. So he guarded the truth, 1, inside, by being clear about where he was basing his knowledge, and then, 2, doing what he could to develop his mind in such a way that he could actually see from his own experience what was true and what was not, particularly with regard to the issue of putting an end to suffering. The third determination is to be devoted to relinquishment. The Pali word for relinquishment, kaga, can mean anything from giving a gift to giving up your defilements. You're learning how to let go from the very beginning of the practice, and you keep letting go in deeper and deeper ways. That's how you're devoted to it, committed to it. Now, there are times when we let go because we know we should let go, but there'll be part of the mind that's ready to take it back. As one of Ajahn Lee's students once said, "It's like holding something in your hand and then putting it down, but leaving your hand on top of it so that you can pick it up whenever you want to again." That's how most of us let go. But, as the Buddha said, you have to really understand things if you're going to let them go properly. And he gives 5 steps. If there's something in the mind that you know is unskillful, watch it. See when it comes and look for what the Buddha calls its origination. Now, when he uses the word origination, it means 2 things. 1, you're looking for the cause, not simply for the fact that it arises, but what's causing it to arise, what arises together with it. And 2, 9 times out of 10, when the Buddha talks about origination, he's talking about causes coming from within the mind. What inside the mind is sparking this? How long does it last? Because that's the next step you want to see, when it passes away. When you see that the origination passes away, and then this particular defilement passes away, then you really see, okay, there is a connection. So, what is it about the cause that attracts you? That's the 3rd step. What's the allure? Where is that particular desire focused? as the Buddha notes. The desire can be focused on almost anything. You think you desire a person, but often it's not the person you desire. You desire a certain perception around the person, or you desire a certain status, like that old commercial about the BMW chill. A guy comes up to the top of a parking garage, he steps out the door of the elevator, sees his BMW in the midst of all these other old jalopies, and he just shivers because it's his BMW. In that case, the status there is where the allure lies. It's not in the car itself, it's in what it means, what it says about you. That's what they're trying to sell you. This is how a lot of advertising works, and your mind does that to you too. So you have to see exactly where is the allure. Often it can be hidden, especially if it's something you're not especially proud of. So you have to dig down. What is it that you like about that particular defilement? Then, in the fourth step, you compare the allure with the drawbacks. If you go for that particular defilement, what's going to happen? Here again, you have to bring in your discernment. This is where the teachings on the three perceptions come in. Whatever pleasure you get out of this, it's going to be inconstant, stressful, not self, i.e., it's not worth holding on to as your own. That teaching on not self is really a value judgment, meant to lead to a deeper value judgment, so that you can say, this is really not worth it. That gets you to the fifth stage in letting go, which is developing dispassion for what you used to have passion for, and that's the escape. So that's how you're devoted to relinquishment. You don't let go just because you're supposed to. You let go because you see there's really no good reason to hold on. And you have to let go at the right time. There are certain things in the path that you have to hold on to in order to get to the end of the path. Think of the raft that takes you across the river. If you let go of the raft in the middle of the river, you drown. You hold on to the raft until it's taken you across, then you let go. In other words, the path has to do its work, and you have to do the work of the path in order to really understand why something is really worth letting go. That's being devoted to relinquishment. And finally, the fourth determination is to train only for calm. Of course, the whole path here is a training, heightened virtue, heightened mind, heightened discernment. It's all for the calm of Nibbana. Now, in the factors for awakening, where some of the factors for awakening are energizing and some are calm, you energize the body and the mind first. If you start out saying, I'll just calm things down, sometimes you put yourself to sleep. So you learn how to energize yourself by the way you breathe, by the way you think. Then you calm things down. This is why, in the breath meditation instructions, you're taught to energize yourself and then calm bodily fabrication, eventually to the point where the breath stops. You energize yourself with rapture and feelings of pleasure, and then you calm mental fabrication even to the point where perceptions and feelings stop. That's the direction we're headed. Now, you don't just suppress these things. You have to calm things down through understanding. In other words, you're practicing calm and insight together. The insight comes in seeing things in terms of fabrication. When the calm is informed by insight, that's when it's genuine. So here too, discernment has to play a role in getting you to understand where you're not calm and why. Those, then, are the four determinations. not neglecting discernment, guarding the truth, being devoted to relinquishment, and training only for calm. These are the determinations that keep you on track. After all, the path has to come out of desire, and the problem with desire is that there's not just one desire in your mind. There are many desires. As we get on the path, what makes it a path is the fact that we clear the way by saying, this desire for the end of suffering is going to be the desire that takes over. This is going to be the master desire. You do that through determination. Determination is what establishes clear priorities for your desires and imposes itself on any desires that don't fall in line. So, your determination for discernment, truth, relinquishment, calm. You're determined for those to have priority over whatever other desires may come sloshing up around them in your mind. As when you're doing concentration practice, it's not the case that you just sit here and wait for concentration to come, or hope that concentration will come, that somehow your past karma will do it for you. As the Buddha said, what you experience right now is the result of past karma, together with present karma, and it's the present karma that makes it possible for you to experience it at all, which means, on the one hand, you can manipulate things right now, but also, if you learn how to calm down the processes of fabrication here in the present moment, it can open up to something that's not caused. That's the calm we're aiming at. That's the truth and the relinquishment we're aiming at through our discernment. All four of the determinations involve discernment. So keep this point uppermost in mind. The path isn't going to happen on its own. You have to make it happen, and you have to overcome a lot of other desires that go in other directions. Give the desire for the path top priority. That's when you're discerning, and that's when you're practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. It's all for the sake of disenchantment, the insight that sees how the other things you've been going for are really not worth it. You've had enough. In the words of the forest Ajahns, you've grown up. You've become sober after having been intoxicated. And you get there, you grow up, by using your discernment, by being true, by letting go, and by training only for calm. Give those determinations top priority, and see how far they can take you. Head, heart, and gut. As the Buddha says, suffering is caused by three kinds of craving: craving for sensuality, for becoming, and for not becoming. A lot of people jump from that statement to a much bigger generalization, that all desire is bad, which is not the case. The path to the end of suffering also includes desire. It's part of right effort. Our problem is that our desires tend to go in conflicting directions. 1 minute, you may want to meditate. Another minute, you may want to do something else totally opposed to meditation. And it's back and forth like this. With all this back and forth, especially when we find ourselves in a society that is not at all favorably inclined to the practice, it's easy to see why the practice doesn't go anywhere for a lot of people. One of the things you notice about the teachings of the Ajahns, especially when they talk about their life stories, is how much determination played a part in their practice. You read Ajahn Lee's autobiography, and he talks a lot about making vows. When Ajahn Mahabua talks about his life story, he talks about how seriously he took his vows. Determination is a strong desire to get all your other desires into line so that the desires you act on all lead in the direction you want them to go. In other words, you give priority to some desires and push other desires out of the way, and you try to do it in a systematic way. Here, our desire is to put an end to suffering. We want to encourage that desire and strengthen it so that it really can take priority over desires going in other directions. The Buddha talks about 4 types of determination. One is not to neglect discernment. Another is to guard the truth. A third is to be devoted to relinquishment. And the fourth is to train only for calm. It's good to think about all 4 of those as we practice. First, not neglecting discernment. How do you not neglect discernment? Discernment has 2 sides, just as our mind has 2 sides. In English, we tend to make a sharp distinction between the mind and the heart. But in Pali, they're one word, citta, which covers both sides. Discernment on the head side, on the mind side, is an understanding of cause and effect, realizing that certain actions lead to certain kinds of results, regardless of whether you want them to lead to those results. It's just the way things are. Actions based on greed, aversion, and delusion are going to cause suffering. Actions based on the lack of greed, lack of aversion, lack of delusion can lead away from suffering. That's one of the basic principles of causality. In fact, causality is so central to the Buddha's awakening that when he gave the very shortest description of what he awakened to, it was a causal principle. When this is, that is. When this isn't, that isn't. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. From the passing away of this comes the passing away of that. That was his shortest synopsis of his awakening. And there's that case of Venerable Sariputta, when he gained the Dhamma eye. It was simply from hearing about cause and effect as taught by the Buddha, a short verse. So that's the head side to discernment, when you have to realize certain things lead to certain results and they don't play favorites. The heart side is the desire for true happiness, a happiness that doesn't change and doesn't harm anybody. A lot of the Buddha's discernment is putting those 2 together, trying to arrange that your actions do lead to that true happiness. That's the kind of discernment you want to have in your determination. The discernment that, on the one hand, admits causality, so that when you do something unskillful, you're not surprised by bad results, and on the other hand, also believes it is possible to do something skillful to get good results, so good that they can put an end to suffering. You always want to keep that in mind because so much of society says, no, an end to suffering is impossible. Content yourself with what we're selling you. The Buddha's there to remind you that the human mind is capable of more. The human heart is capable of more. Why sell yourself short? This is what it means not to neglect discernment. As for guarding the truth and being devoted to relinquishment, one of the functions of discernment is to realize that certain actions that you like to do are going to lead to suffering. Other actions that you don't like to do are going to lead to the end of suffering. You have to be able to talk yourself into doing the things you don't like to do, that lead away from suffering, and talk yourself out of doing the things that you like to do, that will lead to suffering. In other words, you have to think strategically. You have to know how to psyche yourself out. We tend to think that Buddhist wisdom or Buddhist discernment has to do with very abstract principles. But the basic principle is this: knowing how to psyche yourself out, knowing how to make yourself want to do what will be skillful even if the mind is reluctant, and making yourself not want to do things that you've liked to do in the past that have led to trouble or will lead to trouble if you do them again. So truth in this case means being true to your original determination. Relinquishment means giving up the things that get in the way, and your discernment is important in both, but particularly with the relinquishment. There are a lot of things we've got to give up in life if we really want to find a true happiness inside. And the mind all too often focuses on seeing this as a deprivation. You hear the word renunciation, and you think of being imprisoned, starving. But it's better to see it as a trade, and it's a trade up. We're trading things of lesser worth for things of greater worth. There's that passage in the Dhammapada where the Buddha says that if you see a greater happiness that comes from forsaking a lesser happiness, then if you're wise, you'll be willing to forsake the lesser happiness for the sake of the greater happiness. There was a British translator one time who translated that verse and added in a footnote that this couldn't possibly be the meaning of the verse. It must mean something else because it's such an obvious principle. Why do we need the Buddha to tell us this? Well, it may be obvious, but it's not necessarily the way we all act. That's because, in addition to our head and our heart, we have our gut, the part of the body that wants pleasure right away, immediately, and puts you into a bad mood very easily, or a good mood very easily. But it doesn't listen to reason, or it takes a while to listen to reason. So you've got to learn how to outsmart it and how not to be affected by it. Otherwise, you're like that little animal, the sea squirt. Basically, it's just a digestive tract with a little brain. Once it's born, it starts drifting around in the ocean currents. Finally, when it finds a spot where the food is good, it latches on. Then, the first thing it does after it latches on is that it digests its brain, just to show who's in charge. If you let your hungers be in charge, that's what happens. They digest your brain. So you've got to get your head and your heart working together, so you can learn not to be fooled by the push to gain immediate gratification. You've got to see the long term. So truth here means being true to your original decision that you want a higher happiness. And relinquishment means letting go of everything that gets in the way, and use your discernment to help in both cases. The final determination is to train only for calm. In other words, that's your main goal. But calm is also part of the path. Keeping your mind calm and getting it into concentration so that when the going gets tough, you're not surrounded only by tough options. A sense of well-being that you can develop as you get the mind into concentration can give you a place to stay where you have a sense of strength, where you can withstand the parts of the mind that get upset by having to give up this or give up that, and withstand parts of the mind that are lazy when you say, I've got to do this. But gee, I really don't want to. If you get worked up about how much has to be done or how much has to be given up, it's going to be really difficult to practice. But you learn how to remind yourself that the things you have to give up are worth a lot less than the things you're going to gain. Now, until you see some results in the practice, it's going to require some conviction. So, you've got to learn how to talk to yourself, and this is where the head and the heart come in. When you feel like giving up, the Buddha says to remind yourself that you got on to this path because you wanted to put an end to suffering. If you feel like giving up, have you decided you want to suffer a lot more? Do you not love yourself? In other words, you find ways of calming the mind so that it can put up with the difficulties of the path. You can endure them without a sense that they're a hardship. You want to have a sense that they're an opportunity, a good opportunity. The path opens doors. When you can think in those terms, then it's easy to maintain your calm, to be patient and equanimous. You're patient with the difficulties, the sore knees and the sore backs, and the frustrated desires, and equanimous when you think about how long it's going to take. That's where it's helpful to think of how long samsara is if you don't practice. So you get your mind calm through equanimity and patience or endurance, again using your discernment. The discernment functions in all these determinations so that you can straighten out your desires. It's fortunate that our desires are not just brute desires. They have their reasons. They do want happiness. They have a concept of what happiness is and how it can be brought about. That's how you can reason with them. That's how your discernment can overcome the desires that simply say, I want what I want right now, and I don't want to hear any comments on it from anybody. If you're insistent enough and clear enough in your understanding about how true happiness can be found, and how much you want the real thing and not just passing pleasures, you can talk to your desires. You can reason with them. After all, you're still working for happiness. You're not telling them that happiness is bad, or that you have to sacrifice your well-being for the well-being of others. In the Buddha's point of view, genuine well-being is something that, as you work for your true well-being, is going to help others. There's a lot less conflict between your well-being and the well-being of others than you may have thought. He's also not saying that the search for happiness is a bad thing. After all, look at what he did. He spent all his life looking for true happiness, and then, once he found it, teaching everybody how to do it, how they could find it as well. So as we practice, we're going to be working with our desires, learning how to reason with them, to convince them we're all in same boat in the sense that we all want happiness. It's just that some desires are really confused, and fortunately, they can be taught. But it's up to you to want strongly enough to teach them and to keep that goal in mind. This is another meaning of not neglecting discernment. When the Buddha talks about these 4 determinations, the highest discernment, he says, is the discernment that sees the end of suffering. So you want to always keep in mind that it is possible to totally put an end to suffering. We live in a world where that's possible. A lot of people in the world want to say, "Oh, that's not possible." But you don't have to listen to them. Listen to the people who found the way. Don't neglect what they have to say.